Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today we're going to be looking at generating an on-the-fly file download through your browser. We'll be looking at this in two ways, the Noob way versus the advanced way. So let's get into it. Alright, so I'm calling this on the fly because the file content is not actually persisted in a file anywhere. It's going to be generated on the fly and stored in memory, aka your RAM. And we're going to be leveraging the web API's Blob to do this. And Blob is just a file-like object that's immutable, has raw data in it, and immutable just means that the state cannot be changed after it's created. Now, this comes in handy if you want to generate some client or server-side payload and give the user the ability to download it. For instance, you might have a form that allows you to enter an input or do some sort of filtering and then export a certain file based on the input and filtering that you apply to it. And this is going to allow you to do just that. Alright, so before we jump into the code here, just let me show you the end result, which is our bare bones skeleton UI that we have here. Didn't add too much to it just because I want to focus on the file download and the actual implementation. I'm going to be providing this on my website and on my GitHub as well. So feel free to take this code, modify it, and make it look a lot better. So just a quick overview of what we got here. So we have our div container, which has a class container attached to it. And within our div here, we have our 3 anchor tags. And these anchor tags represent the 3 buttons that you guys are going to be seeing up here. So initially when this page is loaded, this div container is actually empty. These anchor tags here are created programmatically and added on the fly. Same thing with the blob payload. The blob payload is also created programmatically. So blob just stands for binary large object. Just think of it as a binary representation of the payload that you're passing into it. So for instance, we have our CSV, and a text file. So the blob is just a binary representation of each of those files. And you can see here, these anchor tags, they have a unique URL attached to it. If you were to click on this right now, this would actually download the payload attached to this. So you're going to see a bit more about this when we jump into the code. Alright, so now let's look at the more interesting stuff here, our code. So this bit of code here, this is all you're going to need in order to implement a file download in your browser here. So let's step through this code line by line. And just to clarify here, this is the noob code. I'm going to go over some more advanced code that you'll see a bit later on. And the advanced code is a bit more robust. The noob code is not robust and it's not as reusable. So after I step through this, I'm going to talk a bit about why it's not robust and it's not reusable. Okay, so the first thing we see here, file name and class list. File name just simply consists of our date as a timestamp, and then we're going to append that to the file name there. Class list is just styling for the button that we're going to be using. And then we have our test payload. So in this case here, our test payload is going to be a CSV. So the first row that you see here is going to be column names, and then the rows after that are going to be the data for the CSV here. So next we have our method here, build download link. So build download link takes 2 parameters here. First, the data that we actually want to pass in as a payload, and then the file name that we want to download the file as. So on the first line here, we're going to be creating our blob instance here. So our blob, remember, this is just like a immutable file like object here. It's going to be taken in data, and this is just simply a concatenation of all the data in the array passed into the constructor here. And we're also passing the type, which is going to be the type of file it is and the char set that we want to attach to it. Now if we look at the next line here, this is going to be creating our buttons that you saw on the previous page. So here we're using the HTML DOM create element method, and this simply takes in a string representing the type of tag that you want to create. So if you were to pass in div here, this would create a div element. We're passing in A for anchor, so this is going to create an anchor element here. The next line here is going to create our unique URL, and this URL is tied to a specific blob object. Another thing to note is the URL lifetime is tied to the document in the window in which it's created. So if you were to refresh the window, then that URL would no longer exist and wouldn't be applicable to any blob objects. Actually, let me switch over here and show you. So if we inspect this guy, so scroll up a little bit, you can see each of these anchor tags here have unique URLs. So I'm going to copy this link address, I'm going to paste it here, and notice how that triggers a download. And this is the payload here for that. So if we go back here and refresh this page, go back here and refresh. Oops, let me paste that in. See, it no longer exists. And that's because the URL is tied to the lifetime of the page on which it was created. And then the last few things here, we're going to set the label for a button by setting the inner HTML to a string that we have here. In this case, it's going to be noob sampled one.csv. And then we want to specify a download file name. So we're going to be passing in our file name and setting it for the download attribute here. And lastly, we're going to iterate through a class list that you see up here. And we're going to attach all these classes to our anchor button that we created here, and then return our anchor button. Finally, once we've created our anchor element here and returned it as a link, it's going to be a matter of appending this to a parent container. So we call our method here. We're assigning the return value link, which is our anchor button here, to DL_link. And then we're going to take this here, representing our anchor button created, and append it to a root container. And the root container in this case is going to be a div, which has a class container on it. So we're querying and looking for that class container, grabbing the first item. This is just going to be the one item in this case, and then appending our anchor button to it. So if I grab this little snippet of code here, I'm just going to demonstrate how it finds this and then appends the child to it. Let's switch back over here. If we look at elements, we can see that we have one div here within the body of the page, and this is the only div that has a class container on it. If we run this query here, we can see that this is the only div that it finds, and then it's going to append our anchor tag that we created on the fly to it. Alright, so now for a quick demonstration of the file download process here. So I'm going to close this. Let's download all three of our files. You can see all three files downloaded. We'll go over here to show all, and then let's open it up. See, this is our text file, and then our two CSVs. These are going to contain the same payloads here. So we'll open them up. So our CSV file, formatting has to be worked on a little bit, but that's something you can sort out. And that's it. Now that we've seen the download link in action, I'm going to flip back over to the code here, and we're going to talk about how we can make this code a bit more reusable and a bit more robust. So I'm going to point out a few things here. So the first thing here, I see file name, class list, test payload, and DL_link. These are all global, sitting in the global namespace. So these are polluting the global namespace. So if you use any third-party libraries that declare variables with these same names, you're going to run into name collisions issues. All right, so next on the list here, I'm seeing that we have hard-coded values here, here, and here as well. So for instance, if you wanted to create a button with a different label, say Noob sample number 3, you're going to have to duplicate this code here. Same thing if you wanted to create a blob with a different char set or a different type, you're going to have to duplicate this code here. Or we want to avoid having to duplicate code. And then the last couple of things here. I'm seeing here that there's no validation or error checking in our main method that we have here. So what's going to happen if data or file name is null? This is going to error out here, and then this is possibly going to error out here. So we want to add some sort of validation or some sort of error checking to check and make sure these parameters that we're passing in have values assigned to them. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about here is, so once our link is created, we're appending it to a root container. And since this value here is hard-coded container, it's always going to be looking to append to a container. So if we have another div that we wanted to append it to, we're not going to be able to do that unless we duplicate this code. So to summarize, we need to get rid of our global variables that we have here. We need to add some sort of validation or error checking just to verify that data and file name are not null or empty. And then we also need to get rid of our hard-coded variables seen here and seen down here. And that should make our code a little bit more reusable and a bit more robust. Okay, so I've detailed all the issues here with this bulk of code that we have here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this video right here. And then in the next video, I'm going to pick up on where we left off here. And we're going to detail how we're going to fix all those issues in some more advanced code over here. Stay tuned for the next video. And for this one, remember to like and subscribe. And also leave a comment to let me know if you found this helpful or if you're going to be using this code. And remember the source code, I'm going to leave a link in the description. And you're going to be able to find it on my website and also on my GitHub. So I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.